So some relevant laws and cases, I won't spend any time on that, I've gone through that, but let's talk about the last point. The monetary system will blow up. Where we are headed, without exception, the history of irredeemable legal tender, paper, and electronic money is that its purchasing power always approaches its cost of production. 0. What does that mean? The intrinsic value of something is what determines its ultimate value. The Federal Reserve note, I don't know what it is, back in 2007, it was roughly 3.7 cents to make one of those notes. So in other words, a $1 note cost 3.7 cents, and a $100 note cost 3.7 cents. So from the Federal Reserve's point of view, it's better to get many $100 notes out there as possible because the purchasing power, i.e. their gross profit margin, is significantly higher, inflating the currency really quick to get those 100 notes in people's hands. Electronic money, of course, costs millionths of a cent, because to create an order of magnitude of currency, you just push the 0 button on the keyboard, and now I've gone from 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000 to a billion to 100 billion to a trillion, whatever I want. And it doesn't cost anything. So without exception, and we're coming up to this 42-year mark, 42 years is the magic number when these currencies fail. And that's where we are today. John Kenneth Gilbreth says, the process by which banks create money is so simple that the mind is repelled. There's a great YouTube video that I would recommend you watch. It's called Money as Debt. Money as Debt. And you will see how the mortgage, we're talking about the mortgages recently and seeing all this scandal in the mortgage industry, but it's even worse because they actually never lent you anything. What they did was they took your signature by you signing on the piece of paper. They got to create the deposits for the amount of money you deposited. So in other words, they got to create the money out of thin air with your promise to pay it back, and then they get to use that to lend to other people. And boy, it's a vicious circle. The Money as Debt will show you this, and it does it in a supremely well manner that I would recommend you take a look at that video. Banks create money literally out of nothing. Like I said today, almost all of it is created with electrons. And the Federal Reserve notes that they pull back in and they destroy and they reissue new ones, I think, to some extent, are kept within the gold and silver range. Money exists simply as a bookkeeping entry at the bank. This is from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. If the bank makes a loan, it credits the checking account of the borrower. This creates new money in the form of additional checkable deposits for the borrower. So it creates it out of thin air. There is no basis in the underlying money. It's mind-boggling. As I talked to you before, when I showed you through the egg slides, basically, money today is no longer a store of value. Your grandparents were thinking when they put into the Social Security system that the $1 that they were putting in then was going to buy the same amount of stuff as the $1 that they would have 20 or 30 or whatever years later. What a shame. You know, if you remember, some of you are older than me, some are younger. Those of you who are older, I know you're probably thinking, I remember first putting in, being taxed this money, and thinking to myself, boy, this will be a great retirement. And today, probably gets you through a half or a quarter of the month before it's all gone. And you can't live in the style you were accustomed to while you were working, thinking of this great retirement program. Why not? Because your labor was stolen through the effects of inflation, through this manipulative monetary system. The bankers are literally gambling with the future, but this is, throughout history, this is what happens when you let bankers and paper money systems take over. Here's some hyperinflationary events. Like I said, America had its original one back in 1787. 1787, we had 800% per month inflation. Thomas Paine wrote, "The laws of a country ought to be the standard of equity and calculated to impress on the minds of the people the moral as well as the legal obligation of political justice." But tender laws, when he's saying tender laws here, he's talking about paper tender. But tender laws of any kind operate to destroy morality and to dissolve by the pretense of law what ought to be the principle of law to support, reciprocal justice between man and man, and the punishment of a member who should move for such law ought to be death. He realized that social fabric and other stuff is destroyed by unjust weights and unjust measures. We have a constitutional crisis. I asked, what does Texas declare as legal tender? The Constitution requires that gold and silver coin. But yet today, I don't see any state legislator except maybe David. Actually, I think there's another one, who are trying to stand up and say, wait a minute, we have a constitutional crisis. What's interesting is I read a paper the other day that I don't know how it got put into the Harvard Law Review. The gentleman's historical facts are so mixed up. But Benjamin Franklin, who was a big proponent of paper money, boy, he wanted paper. He loved paper money. As a matter of fact, he was arguing for paper money and the emission of bills of credit in the Constitution until he saw the after effects of when they went to the gold and silver coin, how stability reigned and other things. And he wrote in his Pennsylvania Gazette, since the federal Constitution has removed all danger of our having a paper tender, you can't show me one amendment since this was written that the federal Constitution allows for a paper tender. The founding fathers, even Benjamin Franklin, who was a big proponent of paper money, says the Constitution has removed all danger of us having a paper tender. Our trade advanced 50%. Franklin was just shocked. He couldn't believe it. This is why I'm telling you, David, the first state that puts in a hard currency is going to be a winner. Investment from all over the world will pour into that state. We can, in this state, could be winners. I mean, we will. You want to increase business and other things? Get people to put real capital in here. Give people real just weights and measures, and we will win. Our money people can trust their cash and have brought their coin into circulation. Because the government is here is supposed to be here to protect us, to protect that standards of weights and measures, not to deceive us. And what we have now is we have a deceptive system rather than an honest system. So Ben Franklin summed this up properly, and if you knew and you read the history of him before this, because he didn't believe that having a solid monetary system would do this, but the effects afterwards, goodness. We ratified the Constitution, we ratified the Bill of Rights, and now look at it. Our trade has advanced 50%.